Welcome back to Neuroconversant Leadership, where we talk about effective leadership and communication, especially in the STEM workplace or wherever there is neurodivergence and communication is an issue, which is just about everywhere. Today, we're trying something new. I have two guests with me today. I've got Neil Marshall and Kurt Mosley. Both of you, welcome.
Thanks for having us, Jeremy. Nice seeing you.
Good to be here, Jeremy.
We're excited. Can you each explain what it is that you do and a little bit about how you got there?
Sure. So I'm the chairman of Health Search Partners. We're an executive search firm. We specialize in leaders for hospitals and health systems, mostly not-for-profit. I've been doing it 30 years, probably done 600 assignments, interviewed about 10,000 hospital executives. So that's who I am. As far as the other thing is, this first 90 days program is something that Kurt and I have developed over the last year or two because we wanted to go from just helping clients find the right person to helping them make sure that that right person stays and has a very strong impact on their organization.
Right. Even though it would benefit you if they came back to you to hire another person soon after.
It doesn't. Number one, we have a year guarantee.
Oh, good.
Right, because we're at the executive level. Actually, some of our CEO searches will be 3-year guarantees. So it's in our best interest that not only, again, do they find the right person, but that we structure a way that the right person can then be successful.
Wonderful. And Kurt, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Kurt Mosley. I've spent 35 years of healthcare leadership, last 5 in executive search. And during that time, I just help hospitals and medical associations across the country find the right people to lead. I'm the association practice leader at Health Search Partners. And before that, I spent almost 30 years with AMN Healthcare, building partnerships with 25 different state hospital associations. So endorsing our products, and very proud of that. And I'm also a national speaker on several topics, and I've spoke to thousands of people, healthcare professionals nationwide over the last 30 years about issues that we're going to talk about today and in the future.
Perfect. So between the two of you, it's a few years of experience.
way more than we'd like sometimes.
So you mentioned the first 90 days. Tell me a little bit more about that.
The origination story, if you want to hear that, is that
Great.
Kurt and I are interviewing a CEO about another topic, and he said, well, when I start a new job, when I went out to Lubbock, he was running a 22 hospital system out in Lubbock, Texas. So when I start a new job, my wife stays home, gets the house ready, gets the kids ready, sells the house, and I move into the hospital. And I went, Richard, everybody works hard their first 90 days. And he said, no. I move into the hospital. Most big hospitals have residence dorms, and he moved in for 90 days until his wife and family came. And it blew my mind. And I was like, I've interviewed 10,000 hospital executives, and I've never heard anybody talk about something like that. So we decided to do an article on it, and it got deeper, and we did more articles. And we've just come to firmly believe that the things that you do in the first 90 days in a new position, whether it's a new organization or just but they're going to define your legacy.
Nice. It seems obvious, but maybe it's not. What were the things that he got out of actually living in the hospital in those first 90 days?
So the first one was, he said the first morning he wakes up, and he's an experienced guy, right? So he's older, and he says, I did what all old people do. I asked the residents how they slept, and one of them said, slept like crap. The mattresses are horrible. And he said, I know somebody who can fix that. And he called up the VP of facilities, and he says, we're going to Costco today and take 5 pickup trucks, and we're buying 30 mattresses, and we're installing them tonight. And he said, he was there, 7, 8 years. He said on his last day there, people still talked about that.
It's so amazing, the things that people remember. I do a lot of training, and I'll see people years later, and what they remember are stories that I told about my childhood, not about the lessons. It's
Sure.
I mean, that's not a little thing, the buying of those mattresses, but compared to the other 8 years, it's amazing that that's the thing everyone remembers.
I mean, and it from the standpoint of what did he spend? 5 grand maybe, but what he got out of that, and we call it symbolic acts. It was a symbolic act, right? It was, I'm going to fix, I hear what you're saying and I'm going to fix your problem. And all of a sudden he's the person that can fix problems.
I just think that the first 90 days determine, Jeremy, whether people trust you how to operate. They're not interested in your strategy right up, but how you operate. And I think that was very important for Richard Parks, how he made the decisions. He understood their problem. They were having, they're on call 24/7. They need to sleep well. And he took an immediate symbolic act that he could fix that day, number one. Number two, he could make an impact. Number three, had a lasting impact.
I love it. Tell me more what you mean by symbolic acts.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we talk about is deciding early on something that you're going to do or things that you're going to do that symbolize how you either want to lead or how you want the organization to be. So I'll give you a great example, and I know Kurt's got one too. But my first job out of college, I was in a management training program, and they fired our CEO. So the new CEO was starting the next day, and so all of us trainees were looking out the window, watching him, and he drives into the parking lot, gets out of his car, walks through the parking lot and picks up garbage. Never says a word, throws it away, comes in, and hey, I'm Grover Martin. How you doing? But that was a symbolic act, right? He wanted us to know that it was going to be different and we were going to be better. And he was not going to accept C behavior. So I will tell you that that's the last day that he ever picked up garbage, because all of us showed up 15 minutes before he did every day. And we walked the parking lot and we made sure that there was no garbage anywhere. But he never said a word. It was what he did that was so important.
One of the gentlemen we interviewed, his name was Jim Decker. He was been a CEO for the last 30 years at several facilities, but he wrote a book called Reviving the Heart of Leadership. And in that, we were discussing different topics, different chapters. And he said, well, I first start a new job, and he had like two or three. He wasn't a job jumper, but so when I first started a new job, I used the 25, 50, 25 rule. And I'm like, okay, what the heck's that? As your head just turned, you're going, okay, what's that? Never heard of that. Just like when Neil was talking about the situation moving in the hospital. I said, tell me a little bit more about it. He said, Kurt, at the start, you have to earn your authority. You have the job title, but you still have to earn it. But he said, when you walk in, 25% of the people are on your side right away because you're in charge. 25% at the bottom, not that he doesn't pay attention to them, are people that are questioning things and may not ever see eye to eye with what you're doing or your thought process. But he said 50% are in the middle. And he said, win the middle early, because that gets, understand why they're on the fence, how to win them over through symbolic acts, through discussing with them. But he said that really helped me quite a bit. He said, and not that he didn't pay attention to that bottom 25%, but a lot of them just, flat didn't want to work with him in some cases, but he was very polite to him, worked with him. But he said, I won that middle, and it helped me get some of my strategic initiatives across the start. But he also said, I loved him in his book. He said, I made a big blunder when he first got there. He said, I'm going to make a big hit. So his first meeting, there was a Dunkin' Donuts just opened up in town, and he thought, I'll make a big hit. He showed up with all these donuts. Everybody kind of looked at him and picked around at the donuts. And he thought, afterwards, he walked away. He's like, what happened? One of his associates came up to me and said, you kind of made a mistake. He said, what'd I do? And he said, well, we've used the same baker for the last 25 years at the hospital. So he said that in his book, and he talks about this, he said, Kurt, one thing, he said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So he went to the baker, asked what he did wrong, asked what each doctor, what was his leadership staff like. And the next day, next meeting he had, he showed up, had all the right donuts. There was nods all around the room. Nobody even came up and just said, you got it. You understood, you made a mistake, and you corrected it. So it really built a lot of trust, and he cared, and he wanted to understand what made them comfortable. And he was coming into their environment. He was not trying to shape them into his own Dunkin' Donut choice.
I love that. And there's so much in there. like you said, sometimes mistakes are the thing that give you the most credibility because you're going to make them at some point, and
Sure.
the people who handle them well gain more respect almost than people who hadn't made a mistake in the first place. Another thing you talked about was trust. Tell me more about building trust, not from necessarily your business actions, but your actions as a human.
Well, I think it's very important. Again, you have to earn that trust. And people, George Patton said it the best, our famous Army general. He said, "You're always on stage." My father years ago said, "I'm going to give you the keys to the mint here." And I thought he was going to give me some money or a new car or something. He was right out of college. And he said, "I'm going to give you some advice." And I said, "What's that, Dad?" And he said, "It's hard to talk your way out of something you behave yourself into." And he said, think about that because many of our leaders, their actions, their audio doesn't correlate with their physical, what they do. So what they say and how they behave. And people are looking, they're not expecting for you to be a genius at day one, but they're looking to trust you and knowing that your actions have to mimic, what your behaviors have to mimic what your policy is. And your behavior counts 10 times for any edict, email you send out, or any new policy you implement. They're looking at your behavior. They're looking, and most importantly, they're looking to trust you. Not expecting you to be perfect, but can I trust him or her?
And how much weight is there for acts that they do that are clearly visible and things that people might not have even seen? The way you act when no one's looking is sometimes different than the way you act when people are. Is there a way that you can kind of bridge that gap and show people how you behave when no one's looking?
You know, I think that comes down to that authenticity type thing, right? Where if you're authentic, whether you're in public or behind closed doors, I think that that radiates. It's not the crises that are going to define you. It's kind of that everyday things to every single day that are going to define you. We had a CEO that espoused before he started that his people, because in healthcare, if you can retain and attract people, you're going to win because it's very, very difficult to find good employees in healthcare today in hospitals. And he said, it's very important. Our people are very important to us. He came the first day and there was executive parking right next to the hospital, big hospital, huge parking lot. Executive parking was right there, right? 8 places. So he parked right next to the hospital and he went in for his first meeting and he said, folks, to his team, he said, our people are the most important. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Our people are the most important. Then why are we parking right next to the hospital and making them park hundreds of yards away? He said, from now on, we park in the back parking lot. We're going to make executive parking is now parking for all the different employees of the month.
Nice.
We're going to walk from the back of the parking lot. We're going to use that time to greet our people and be visible and show them that they are more important than we are.
And I think to answer your question about when people aren't watching, I think how our leaders build trust quickly at the start is to being predictable and visible and making sure that they, as you said, as they're walking away, they're still visible, whether they're walking to the parking lot or they have something come out and somebody's hit their car and they throw a fit in the parking lot. Those are the things that people see. But people don't trust big statements. They trust repeated behavior. And that's how you build trust early. And I remember one CEO that we interviewed, he knew he had the title. I mean, obviously, but his first month, he made a point to always introduce himself and say, I'm with leadership of the hospital, but he never said his title. And we were talking to a gentleman that was in the Army, and he said he always tried to get his title in because that's a very structured situation in the armed forces. But he would say his name, and then people would walk away and goes, "Who's that?" And they go, "That's the new CEO." And it made an impression on people. I mean, he
Yeah,
introduced himself, his full name. He was in leadership, and he just started the hospital, but didn't have to tell him, "I'm the CEO."
that's fantastic. We've talked about a number of stories of like examples of what people have done. Is there any sort of structure or repeatable process in the first 90 days that you work with new executives on?
I think the first thing is to decide that you're going to intentionally do things, and you decide, okay, what tone am I going to set? Who do I want them to think I am? What kind of leadership statements? What symbolic acts am I going to make? And then you go and do them.
And I think in that first part too, just advice to collect data, talk to people at every level, especially below your direct reports. That's very important because they're the ones that they're the soldiers, if you will, that are dealing with the situations. They understand what's working, what's broken, and where the influence sits before making any changes. We always talk to people about culture. You have to earn the right to change culture, but you have to learn the culture first before you get that right to change it. And that's really important. Reading the culture, sitting back, gathering data, as much as you can. I mean, there's always pressure, Jeremy, to do things quickly for everybody. But John Wooden said it the best. He was former college basketball player, but obviously all-time basketball coach at UCLA, I think 7 national championships. But he said, he had a quote, I always love to repeat this. He said, be quick, but don't hurry. And what he meant by that is, you have to make decisions during the first 90 days, but don't make hurried decisions because they're desperate decisions and people see the insecurity in that. So he said, be quick, but don't hurry. It's a good thing to keep in mind.
I like it. I'm wondering if you can explain that a little bit more, how to make quick decisions but not be hurried about it.
Sure. I think if there's something that has to be taken care of immediately, obviously you have to take care of it, but try to gather, like I said, as much data as you can before you make that decision. And then at the same time, consult with the people that you're starting to work with and say, is this something that has to immediately be done, or can we look at this and gather more data? But when you make that decision, is it something that's fixable right now? Will it have an impact? And we'll all benefit. That's something that's very important. And again, when people see hurried leaders make incorrect decisions sometimes, and people that, like I said, they don't hurry in their process, sometimes you have to make a decision in that first 90 days, but gather everything you have, all the data, and seek as much input as you can from the people you work with, from your team, from your support group, and say, I'm going to have to make this decision. What do I do? And talk to as many people as you can before that and gather their input and say, I need your help with this because you've been here. I haven't, but I don't want to misstep, but this is something we have to take care of today. But it's immediate. So that's what be quick, don't hurry means.
I like that. And in there, it's important that you have good quality people on your team
Absolutely.
that you can ask for help from. One thing that a lot of people struggle with is having quality people who think very differently than themselves. They
Yeah.
tend to have a hard time incorporating that person's ideas. But the people who are completely different than you have that wonderful insight that you're not going to have. How do you recommend people engage the people who are just so different than themselves?
Yeah, and I think that we're talking about early symbolic acts, but if you can fix one real visible problem that people deal with every day, it shows that you care. Something that, it could be something that every single employee has to deal with every day, whether it's some issue at the hospital, whether the reader cards are working incorrectly, whatever it could be. But it shows you're paying attention, shows you're willing to act, and it builds that credibility very quickly. It's a smart move.
Neil, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that as you're building trust, I mean, one of the ways to do it is by asking questions, right? And being open and not making quick decisions as you're asking the questions and getting to understand, Covey, one of Covey's 7 habits of highly effective people, which I thought was an excellent book. And it's old, obviously, but it was, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And I think that that's a real important thing, right? If they're on your team, um, first try and understand them. Seek first to understand and then to be understood.
One of the things that when someone absolutely doesn't agree with you or you have a hard time, people want to push back. And if they disagree, then they're going to restate their position again and just try to get you to understand it. rather than really trying to understand the other person. But it's so hard for us to just stop and say, why do you think that? And if you get to the why, then very often you learn something that you wouldn't have otherwise.
The biggest way to do it is to be able to present their idea back to them, right? Then you demonstrate that you truly do understand what they're saying. And then you can make the decision whether it's something that's going to fit what you believe the team should be doing.
Yeah. And I think if you've done that and truly understood their point of view, even if you make the decision that they don't like, then they're much more willing to go with it because they know that a decision has to be made and you actually heard me through. I'll accept that you don't agree with me.
Yeah, I think most people, if they have an idea, if they have an opinion about something, they just want to be heard. And sometimes, again, back to Kurt's "be quick, but don't hurry." You need to stop and listen and understand. Then you make the decision. But most people will support you if you show that you've truly listened and that they've been heard. Most people just want to be heard.
It's amazing the statistics on people who feel seen and heard. Companies that have that are so much more financially successful. And people think, oh, feeling seen and heard, that's a nice thing, I guess. But then you look at how much more money those companies make. They're like, oh, I guess that is really an important thing now.
I mean, it's important in building morale. I mean, and again, I think what's to tag on to what Neil said, if the decision you make is different from the person you were talking to, and you come back and say, "Gosh, that employee was right," go back to them and said, "We're going to change. You were right initially. We made a mistake. This was a wrong call, and thanks for bringing it up. Let's try it your way now." That resonates so big,
Yeah.
especially if it's somebody in the hospital. It's influential that they'll tell two friends. You've heard the whole story, so it's good leaders. They always feel like, well, I can't really admit I'm wrong. Well, my dad always told me, you never lose, you just learn.
That's a good one. I like alliteration. For the people in the audience who aren't moving to a new company, but they're maybe getting their first management role, they've spent 10, 20,000 hours getting really good at engineering or whatever it is, and now they move into a management. What are some suggestions you can make for them in their first 90 days?
You know, if you going from being an individual contributor or whatever to a first leadership, the reason that you were picked is probably because you're really good at what you do, right? Which means you solve problems, you move fast, you are right most of the time. Those things aren't going to serve you very well in leadership. What you want to do in leadership is figure out the tone and then figure out how to earn your people's trust. Because if you don't have most people come in and they immediately want to change something. They want to, there's something wrong, so we want to change something. I think maybe you're better off figuring out what the landscape is and earning some trust before you. I mean, we had a CEO, Jay Robinson, out at Kaiser. He runs two facilities for Kaiser, 264 leaders in his organization. He said when he came in, he met with all of them. He met all of them in their offices. Number one, that was one. I thought that was big. But number two, the last question he asked them was, if things are significantly better in 90 days, what has changed? And he allowed all of that to bubble up. And you know what? There were 8 or 10 things that bubbled up from those 264 people that were well worth looking at and figuring out how to change. He didn't come in and say, this is what I want to do. He said, what do you think we should do?
And there's a great book out there, to your point, Jeremy. It's called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." It's by Marshall Goldsmith. And advice to a new leader coming in and assuming a leadership role: be open to what you did in the past may not carry forward in that leadership role. Be open to changing. Be open to learning what leadership's all about. Is assume you say, well, I was successful in my last job and I was promoted, but again, A lot of times you have to come in and say, I have to do this different, or I can't do this different, or I have twice the direct reports and I have to treat my communication differently. I have to treat my personality differently. So understand that although people are learning to get to know you, you have to learn to get to know how to be a leader in that time.
And it's not easy. And they've, like I said, been trained 10 to 20,000 hours to do the last thing, and they get a handbook when they get that new role.
Well, no, part of why we developed the first 90 days is, we sat there and thought about it. And I thought, a healthcare executive probably only is going to start 7 or 8 jobs in their career of a 40-year career, right? If they're, 7 years here, seven, if you only do something 7 times, how are you going to be any good at it? And so being trained and figuring out what other people did I go back, I wish that I had this in my first job. I wish that I had somebody that said, okay, Neil, you need to do a symbolic act. You need to decide who you want them to see you as. Wow. I just went to work. I just showed up and did what they wanted me to do. Right. But gosh, and building trust with people, how do you do that? And why? And I wish somebody had.
I think trying to prove they belong at the very start, they got the role. So best leaders know they don't have all the answers and they go learn. And during that time, that's what really builds credibility. So don't go in proving that you belong already. You have to earn, as we talked about, that earned authority. You have to earn that right that they belong. And you belong by understanding the circumstances you're coming into and the environment that you're going to be working in.
And so many of the things you've talked about will be beneficial even if you're not the manager. When you start in a new role and you're not managing anyone, understanding the culture, doing symbolic acts, all of those things are going to be beneficial whether you're a manager or not.
Individual contributors can learn from that and learn how to set a tone and how to do things that people are going to talk about for a long time.
I love it. Sadly, we're going to need to start wrapping up. Can you tell the audience how they could reach out and or learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So both Kurt and I are very active on LinkedIn. And then if you're a healthcare leader, especially because that's our focus, and need help building a leadership team, you just go to our website, healthsearchpartners.com.
And on our website are all our podcasts and our 90-day articles if people want to look further about that. All our thought leadership's also on our website, so people can look into what we've been doing and a lot of the discussions we've had today. All the articles are on our website. So, or reach out to Neil and I directly through LinkedIn. We're available.
Perfect. I will put links in the show notes. And then I always end up with this question: is if there's one piece of communication advice we can all benefit from, what would that be? I'll take one from each of you.
I would say, listen, seek first to understand.
Yeah. And I'll go back to, I don't want to repeat, but my father said, watch your behavior. You're on stage. You're on stage all day long, whether you think people are watching or not. So you just, you got to look around and think every day people are watching me when I walk to the parking lot, when I go to the cafeteria, when I'm, whatever, when I'm picking up a piece of paper or whatever. Just make sure people know you're on stage and you're aware of your surroundings. And you may not know everybody in the facility, but make sure you greet them and smile too, when you go by. I think that's a lot of things we kind of forget. So
I love that. Kurt, Neil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks. We enjoyed being here.
Thanks for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you, share this episode with one person on your team who might benefit from it. And if you're leading a technical team and want to explore how these communication principles could work in your organization, visit www.neuroconversantleadership.com to learn more. And there you can reach out to schedule an appointment. I'd be happy to talk through what might be going on in your world. See you next week.